And as we go through, thanks folks for joining me for this podcast. I'm sorry. I've been working on my podcast this morning, and so if I say podcast instead of webinar, that's where my mindset is. And for those of you that are joining me or getting to know me for the first time, I'm Gordon Brewer. I'm the person behind the Practice of Therapy blog and now podcast. Started a podcast back in August, and it's really starting to take off. So if you're joining me for the first time, if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com and maybe listen to the podcast. I've got the one that's going to be coming out here today. I'll get it all loaded up here. Been working on that before this webinar. Is an interview with John Clark, who's another private practice consultant and mentor and coach. And we have a big, great conversation on marketing. So I'm excited about that coming out later today. So I think folks are starting to trickle in. According to my clock, it's 1:02. So we'll plan on just getting started here. So a few housekeeping things. I've got everybody on mute, and that way we're just going to be able to cut out any background noise that might get in the way. I'm also recording this, so if you have any problem with being seen on the recording or whatever, let me know that afterwards. I've got the comments open, and if you'll look on your screen, you'll see down there where it says chat. So if you have questions as we go along, if you'll just type those in the chat, and that way, towards the end, what we'll do is I'll open it up for questions, but I can also look over at the chat and be able to see what questions that folks might have. Again, thanks for joining me on this this webinar on GSuite for therapists. And want to give you a little bit of a background on this. The reason I got interested in GSuite or Google G Suite, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it specifically, but one of the things when I started my private practice, I know that I ran into, and some of you might be running into this, and have a concern about keeping your email and your files and all of that sort of thing HIPAA compliant or HIPAA secure. And what I was really pumped about, because I use Gmail anyway, I've been a user of Gmail for years, is when I found out that you could actually make Gmail HIPAA secure and HIPAA compliant. Gmail, the free version of Gmail by itself is not HIPAA compliant. Now, it is secure, but it doesn't meet the HIPAA requirements. And specifically what HIPAA requires is that we have what is called a business associate agreement, or a BAA. And with that, that just kind of proves for the folks, I was reading something earlier this week about HIPAA, and it sounds like an article I read, and I'll try to find it maybe to put in the notes that I will put out here later after the webinar, that HIPAA is loosening up a little bit because they're realizing that, particularly for people in private practice or people that have small practices, some of the requirements that they have are a little bit heavy or a little bit hard or expensive for just a regular private practice owner to have. So, but one of the main reasons, anyway, I'll get off on these tangents. I'm sorry about that, but one of the things that excited me about G Suite and the Google, it used to be known as Google Apps for Work, but now they've just lumped it in and Google calls it G Suite, is that you can set that up in a way that you can make it HIPAA secure. And it's really one of the most secure cloud applications out there, just because if you think about it, Google's business absolutely depends on that. We think of Google as search engine, and that the word Google has become synonymous with search. And so we'll say, well, let me go Google it. And that's something we all know. But what Google has developed is a whole suite of tools that you use really to encourage you to use their products. But it's also very economical, and I'll talk some more about that. So let's jump in here, and I'm going to share my screen with you here. Let me get to the right desktop here, and we'll jump into this here as we go. So while this GSuite is, for those of you that might not, hopefully most of you are aware of GSuite. GSuite is part of Google, and most of us, I don't know how many of you out there are actually using Gmail, but if you sign up for a Google account, you're automatically have access to the various tools of GSuite. Now, one of the things I'll mention here, and let me go out of this screen here for a second, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to go here on my, I've got my browser set so that when I go into just log on, it comes up with the Google page. It's google.com, and you'll find the tools of GSuite over here to the top right. You've got your mail here, which is just simply the Gmail account when you log in. And then over here to the right are the Google Apps. And sometimes I'll refer to it as Google Apps and also GSuite. But there's all these apps that you have here that are part of GSuite. And you can see there's quite a bit here with this. So that's what I'm talking about when I mention GSuite. Now, what you have to, in order to use GSuite or use the tools of GSuite, you do need to be able to have a Google account. And so, you know, if usually probably if you go into Google over here in the top right hand corner, it'll ask you to sign in, or if you haven't signed in already, but that's where you'll be able to access all of these different tools. So why would you want to use GSuite? Well, here's a few things. First of all, it's going to help you stay organized with your practice. I know for me, I'm not a naturally organized person, and one of the things that I have to stay on top of is being able to be aware of how I manage files, how I manage my email, how I do, you know, like correspondence with clients, correspondence with potential referral sources. All of those things are part of what I do in GSuite. One of the, and I'm going to go through all these different tools, but they can really be beneficial to you in your practice. And as I talked about earlier, if you set it up the right way, and in particular using you have to use the paid version of GSuite, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. You can set it up to be HIPAA compliant. The other thing is that GSuite and the tools of Google allow you to do is to be able to share things easily with others. You can use, typically the way that GSuite works is if you share something, you either send somebody a link to it or you give them direct access through email. So a lot of different ways to share there. I'll talk about a little bit more about Drive here in a minute, Google Drive, but we'll talk about that. But the other thing too is that if you really play around with the tools of GSuite, you can really customize them for your practice. You know, even get as fancy as setting up the background and all of that sort of thing. the other thing is that you can set up templates to really streamline your documentation and other practice management um, applications. And one of the things about this webinar, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around here a little bit. I'm not going to be able to go into the specific details of each one of these applications. I'm just going to give you an overview of what they do and where you can access it. But as far as how you do it, one of the things that some of you that follow me know is I've put together a course called GSuite for Therapists, and it's a complete online course that I'm getting together, and I'm shooting to have that completed by the end of November. And I'll talk some more at the end of the webinar about how you can access that course and how you can get it at a big discount. It is something that I'm putting a lot of time into, and so that's my main reason for charging for the courses. I just feel like I need to recoup the time that I've put into it. So, but we'll talk more about that later. So let me walk you through GSuite and the different tools that are here. Just to quickly, Drive is one. Most of us are familiar with Gmail. We've got Calendar. We've got Keep. For any of you that might be using something like Evernote, Keep is a kind of something like Evernote that you can use that it's a little bit lighter version. Google Docs, most people are familiar with that. If they've done any kind of work at school, either in graduate school or in college, most places are using Google Docs as their word processing. Google Forms, I did a webinar earlier about how to integrate Google Docs and Google Forms to create a session note helper. And again, in the notes I set up, I'll make a reference to that. And then Google Sheets is the spreadsheet program, and then Google Slides. And one that I left off this list is Google Sites, and I'll talk some more about that. So let's look at what these different things do. So Google Drive is the storage portion of G Suite. And with the free version, I believe you get 2 gigabytes of storage. And I think with the paid version, don't quote me on this exactly, but with the paid version, they up it to like 30 gigabytes. But one of the things I do in my own practice, I've gotten so that I store everything in Google Drive and in their cloud. Number one is that it backs up everything that I've got on my computer. Number two, it's very, very secure. In fact, when you set things up, and I'm not going to be able to go into this in this webinar, but you can actually set up your G Suite account so that you have two-step golly, I'm having trouble speaking today, authentication, where you have to not only you do your password, but it also sends you a text of another code to get into it. So in that sense, it's very secure. And the thing about Google is that they have to keep it secure. Their whole business depends on it. If there was a data breach with Google, it would be tough. And it's actually safer than storing it on your computer, because if you were to lose your computer or your computer were to crash, you wouldn't have access to it. So Google Drive's cloud storage, you can access it from anywhere. You can also designate folders and files to share with people. So in that way, you can use it very much like Dropbox or some of the others like that, or Microsoft. Most services have a cloud storage now. I think even Amazon's got some now. But Google Drive, that's your storage. That's the place where I keep my files, I keep session notes, all of those things in there, and I can also organize it into folders and that sort of thing. Okay, Gmail. Most of us are familiar with Gmail. The one thing that is, to me, again, one of the big selling points for going with the paid version of G Suite is that you can use your own domain with your email. For those of you that have gotten emails from me, you probably have noticed that it's Gordon@practiceoftherapy.com. That's actually a Gmail account. And when you get the paid version, you can add your domain to the end of it. So, and you can also set up aliases under that. For example, I just have the one GSuite account, but if you have a domain, any domains that you have, you can set up aliases through the one single Gmail account. So, for example, my private practice domain name is kingsportcounseling.com. And so all of my private practice correspondence and emails comes from Gordon at kingsportcounseling.com. But for my consulting and coaching, I do practice of therapy. So all those emails come and go from Gordon at practiceoftherapy.com. But guess what? I use it all on the same screen and the same Gmail account. And when I send out an email from that Gmail account, I can designate which domain name I want it to go from. So as you can see, it just makes it really simple and really easy to use. The other thing about Gmail is that, or any of you that have gotten into using Gmail, is that it has a lot of search functions and organization functions. So you can filter different, filter your emails out and then put them into folders and tag them and that sort of thing. Just this past week, I spent a Saturday morning cleaning up my Gmail account and cleaning up my inbox. And so I was able to get my inbox pretty much down to inbox zero by organizing my files and archiving emails that were in my inbox and all of that. And again, in the full course, I'm going to show you how to do those things in the full GSuite course. So the other thing too that you can do with Gmail, of course, is set up autoresponders. So like if you're out of the office, you can set out of the office reply. You can also set up automatic forwarding. So for example, with my virtual assistant, I'm also using Google Voice, and that's a whole other topic about using Google Voice. But Google Voice, you can set it up so that it sends you a transcript of the voicemail that's in there. And so with my virtual assistant, I've got my Gmail set up so that when a voicemail comes in, she is forwarded a copy of that as well. And so she's able to just use Gmail to do all of our office stuff and intake stuff. So when a referral comes in, it goes to a voicemail. She gets the message, and then she follows up with the person based on that voicemail. And again, that's all done through Gmail. So lots of powerful stuff you can do with Gmail and being able to set all that up. And again, it's too much to go into here on how to set that up, but just letting you know what it can do. Google Calendar. Again, if you've got a Gmail account, you've got access to Google Calendar. And the thing about Google Calendar, just like anything else under GSuite, is that you can share that with people. You can actually get it and embed it on your website so that people can see your how you've got it, see your schedule. So, for example, one thing that you could do with Google Calendar is have a specific calendar that just shows your available appointment slots. And then you can put that on your website, and then when people call in, they can say, well, I see you've got an open slot at 1 o'clock on Thursday. Could I set an appointment for that time? Another thing that you can do with Google Calendar is there are some add-ons that you can get to where you can actually send a person a reminder for their appointment. And I'll talk about more about that in the G Suite, the full course. But those are all the things you can do with Google Calendar. Of course, the other thing that's nice about Google Calendar, or really with all of these the G Suite things, is that they are you have access to them across all your devices. So you can actually, and I'm sure many of you know this anyway, but like with your iPhone or your Android phone or smartphones, you can link that to your calendar, and so you've got access to your calendar anywhere you go. And then, of course, sending yourself reminders and all of that sort of thing. Google Docs, of course, is the word processing program. The thing that is nice about it is it's very comparable to MS Word. The other thing that I think a lot of people maybe don't realize is that with Google Docs, you can actually open and create and save those files in different formats. So, for example, if you needed to save a document as a Word document, you could do that. You can save it as a PDF document. I've gotten so that I'm using MS Word less and less. Now, the one thing about Google Docs is it doesn't have quite the oomph to it that MS Word does, that Microsoft Word does. And Microsoft Word will do a lot more things than Google Docs, but for a very basic word processing program, it's great. And I probably use it 2 to 1 over using Word. I use both, but Google Docs is great for that. I do have Google Docs set up with all of my intake forms and paperwork. One thing that I'm working on too, I'll let you know about. I know some of you might have gotten the paperwork packet from me, and I'm going to be upgrading that so that it also includes the Google Doc format for the paperwork packet. So if you and those of you that have previously purchased that, I'll be sure that you get access to the Google Docs format as well. But the thing about it is really, if you've got your paperwork, you can upload it to Google Docs and it'll convert it to that automatically. So anyway, just that as a side note. So obviously you can use Google Docs to create all of your paperwork and all of your letterheads and all of your correspondence and all of that sort of thing. Google Sheets is the spreadsheet program, and it's very much like MS Excel, Microsoft Excel. And you know, I use it a lot. In fact, this week I realized I needed to get better organized, so I set up a time tracking spreadsheet so I could start tracking how I use my time and really figuring out how to be more productive in my work and in my practice. So I used Google Sheets to set that up. There are lots of templates out there too for just doing the whole financial side of your practice with Google Sheets. There's if you go, all you have to do again is Google Sheets templates, and you can find, you know, just hundreds, maybe even thousands of templates that people have already created for, like for having your you know, setting up a checkbook, also setting up a profit and loss statements, budgets, all of those sorts of things. All of that can be done with Sheets. And so again, you don't have to buy an expensive software or program like QuickBooks or FreshBooks. It just takes a little more work on the front end. Excuse me. One of the things, got something to drink here. One of the things, though, is that if your practice is a certain size, you probably do want to switch over to something like FreshBooks or QuickBooks or something like that, because it's going to have more things that you can do in terms of tracking finances, that sort of thing. The other thing you can use this for, of course, is creating like mailing lists. I know when I moved my practice to my new location, I used Google Sheets and Google Docs just to create my mailing list to send out to referral sources and to clients to let them know about us moving to the new locations. I just created the mailing labels with those tools. So again, Google Sheets is the spreadsheet program. Google Forms. Now, for those of you that might have gotten to see the webinar I did on the session note helper, one of the things that you can do with some add-ons is to be able to link these different applications together. So with Google Forms, it's essentially a way to create questionnaires and create online forms. You can use Google Forms to, for example, set up an intake form for clients so that when they go to your website, or even when they even if they just call you, you can send them a link to a Google form that they fill out that will do all of their intake information. And then with an add-on, you can actually take the information from that Google form and have it print out their intake forms. And you can even set it up to do, you know, really kind of a paperless office using Google Forms, where they just have either fill in the blank or drop down forms or check boxes or multiple choice, that kind of thing. You can do it to create quizzes. You can do it to create, I know with, I do all of my session notes using Google Forms, where I've got a form that I fill out, and then with the session note helper and the add-on, it creates my session notes, and I store that in my practice management system and all of that. So there's just lots of neat things you can do with Google Forms. Again, don't have time to go into that in this webinar, but again, it's one that I'm learning to, a part of GSuite that I really love using. So Google Slides, you're watching Google Slides right now. I created this PowerPoint. It's like PowerPoint, and that's what I use to create this presentation. So again, if you're doing, workshops or doing presentations, Google Slides is the PowerPoint-like program that comes with the GSuite. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, Google Keep is, again, it's, if you've ever used Evernote or Microsoft OneNote or any of those types of applications, Google Keep is very much like that. It's a way to kind of keep lists. I know I use Evernote rather than Google Keep, but you could use Google Keep much like you would Evernote. So like if I'm doing research for something and I run across a website that I want to remember, or some sort of reference point I want to go back to, I save that in like Evernote, or you could also do it in Keep. And I know that you can get, again, add-ons that you can put in like Google Chrome, to where if you see something you want to save, you just click on a link at the top, and it automatically puts it into your Google Keep. And again, it's just a great way to capture information. You can set it up to link with your Google Calendar and send you reminders of things. I like to think of Google Keep as a capture program. So we're constantly, like if you have a recipe that you find and you want to take a picture of the recipe, and then you upload it to Google Keep, things like that. So it's just a really great kind of capture tool. Okay, this was one that I didn't have on the beginning list, but this is Google Sites is in a way kind of a lightweight website or web page creator. And it doesn't replace a regular website like for your private practice website. I wouldn't really recommend using it for this, but what I've been able to do with this is I've set up for our practice in my group practice an internal website. And so when people click on the link or the URL for the website or the web page I've created, it's got all the links and everything. It's like an intranet, if you will, that's set up. So my virtual assistant, Nikki, I've got this set up mainly for her use. She just goes to this one link. If she is following up with a client, she goes and clicks on a link in there, takes her to a Google form. She fills out the intake form. When it's set up on the intake form in Google Forms, it throws it to the Sheets form. And so I can go into Google Sheets and look at all the intakes that she's done and how much time she spent on it and that sort of thing. So in a way, it's like a portal that you can set up. You could, I haven't done this for my practice, but you could actually set up like a client portal using Google Sites. So it's a specific link that you would give to clients, and they might go to that portal and be able to look at your schedule. You could put links on there to like PayPal through that so they could pay you for sessions, all kinds of things like that using Google Sites. Again, it's real easy to use and very much you could just, for lack of a better way of putting it, you could set up a whole virtual office that just you and your practice would use, and that you could decide who would have access to that. So again, another really powerful tool with Google Sites. So that's an overview of the main tools of GSuite, and lots of great stuff that can be done with GSuite. All the tools work together. You can link them together. They work pretty well together. Some of them you have to get add-ons to make them work better together and kind of share information. But that's just kind of the power of GSuite. So as I said earlier, you can, when you set it up through the paid version, you can set it up to be HIPAA compliant. And again, I'm not going to have time to go through all of that, but that's going to be part of the GSuite course that's coming up. That's going to have a whole lesson devoted to HIPAA compliance and setting it up for HIPAA. So the paid version, I was going to tell you about this. The paid version of GSuite is only $5 a month, and well worth the investment. It's $5 a month per user. So one of the things with my group practice is I provide the GSuite for everyone, and so I just add users. And so Google bills me $5 a month for each user. As I mentioned earlier, with the paid version, you can use your own domain name for whatever your private practice website is. So it's at whatever your private practice website. Google will give you only with the paid version, they'll give you the business associate agreement that you need for HIPAA. The other thing too is that you've got access to an admin screen. And so that's where you can add users and set it up for people that might join your practice later, or for anybody that you want to have access to that. For each user though, like for example, they have their own Google Drive and they have their own Gmail account and all of that. They have their own logins, everything. So it's not, it's just like you, if they had gone and signed up for a G Suite or a Google account on their own. With the paid version, and it's specifically called G Suite for Business. And we go to this next screen. So hopefully you can see all of this here. I'm not sure if you can see all this. So let me mention this. Okay, so to sign up for the full GSuite course, just go to practiceoftherapy.com/GSuite course. The other thing that I wanted to let you know about, and really kind of maybe is a little bonus for you here, is if you sign up for GSuite through this link, practiceoftherapy.com, GSuite discount, you'll get 20% off your first year. Now this, full disclosure, this is an affiliate link, so I get a commission if you sign up using for the paid version of GSuite through that link, but it's no extra cost to you. In fact, you get a 20% discount off the first year for that. So I think that's got it. So, all right. So lots of, I threw a lot at you there. So I'm gonna unmute everyone. If you have control to mute your own, if you don't want to hear me, we'll open up for questions. Let's see, let me see here. There's one here. Is there any requirement to maintain physical records, specifically of informed consent, or are electronic records sufficient? It's going to depend on your state laws, I would say. And for the most part, I think most people are kind of going paperless with their stuff. I think, in fact, one of the things that I'm going to be playing around with is going to electronic signatures. And there's a way you can set that up. I guess the main thing is with any documentation, you just want to have a way to verify that you've gone over the information with folks and that they've signed off on it either electronically or physically. So let's see. One question I think from Jan is, must you have a domain name or can you use your current Gmail address? You can use your current email address. In fact, it will, when you sign up for the paid version, it will give you the option to go through that. So of whether or not you want to add your domain, it'll actually give you the option of creating a domain name. So so let's see. Let me see. I've just changed the settings on this. So if you have a question, you can either put it in the comments or unmute yourself and just speak up. So other questions. Hopefully I answered those questions for folks. You don't have to have your own domain name to sign up for the paid version of GSuite. So hopefully that answered the question. So other questions? I don't see any. Okay, here's one. I've seen reference to a standard that for email to be truly HIPAA compliant, it should be encrypted from end to end. Is this true, or is GSuite sufficient? Okay, so here's the thing about HIPAA compliance, and I learned this from Roy Huggins. One way around this is that it does have to be encrypted, and so the storage of the information in GSuite, it is encrypted. It meets the HIPAA compliance for encryption. The way the internet works is that I like this analogy to tell how the internet works. If we were to think about, files or records, or let's just use the example. Say I needed to send a message to someone across town and I didn't have the internet. So I'd write the message on a piece of note paper and I'd fold it up, put it in an envelope so that nobody could see it. And I'd go out the front door here. I'd look for somebody and I'd say, hey, are you heading north? Let me hand this to you, and you take it north as far as you're going, and then hand it to somebody else going north. And the person that is closest to this address, would you take it to them? So that gets passed along. That's basically how the internet works, is that we have We have information that goes to our server passes it on to another server, and on so and so forth down the line. Now, as long as somebody doesn't open up that sealed envelope, that it's safe. But the way that encryption works is that if they were to open that envelope up and look in it, then what they would see there would be just a jumbled mess. And the other person on the other end would have to have the code to understand that. So that's how encryption works on the internet. But to answer your question, HIPAA just requires, in my understanding of this, is that HIPAA requires that your messages be encrypted and that you protect your clients. Now, one of the ways around this is to, number one, let me say this just from an ethical standpoint, and I think we would all agree with this, is that we want to keep our client information confidential. Now, if Sally, my client, sends me an email, I don't have any control over how she sends it to me. I just have control over it once I receive it. One thing that you can do is use a service like Hushmail, which encrypts the message all along the way. Now, when I send my message, it's encrypted. The other person on the other end, it's going to be difficult for it to be unencrypted along the way with Gmail. Not saying it can't be done, but that Hushmail is a more secure and that it keeps things encrypted along the way. Now, here's one of the things that I do in my practice is I have my clients in my informed consent sign off on me being able to email them about changing appointment times and that sort of thing. If I need to discuss anything with them specifically concerning their case, I would use something like Hushmail to do that. But if I'm just doing something along the lines of, oh, I need to change my appointment at time, we just do that through regular Gmail. So I don't know if that's answering your question directly, but let me go look at the question again. Let me say this, to be truly HIPAA compliant. Here's something again I learned from Roy Huggins over at Person-Centered Tech. The word HIPAA compliant is not an accurate way of saying things. A better term is to make it HIPAA secure. And Gmail is HIPAA secure based on HIPAA's definition of security, in that the information that you have is stored in an encrypted way. HIPAA compliance is a misnomer in that HIPAA just says you have to keep it secure and you have to keep it encrypted, but they don't tell anyone how to do that. So that's where kind of the confusion comes in. If you want to encrypt your messages that are being sent and received, Hushmail is a good way to do that, or something like Hushmail. The problem that I have with Hushmail is that it makes it very hard for the client to use. In other words, in order for them to receive the Hushmail, they have to have a Hushmail account as well, and they have to be able to log into that. I know, like for example, I'm a provider credentialed with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and whenever they send me an email, it's an encrypted email through a company called Cisco, and I have to log in to their system to receive that email, and I just think that's a little inconvenient. And so anyway, whew. So Jan also said you can use Virtru for encryption with your Gmail. It's a $24 a year, and it's simple for the client. Okay, good. That's great information. Jan, if you'll email me some more information about that, I'll try to include that in my notes here. So Okay, so my clock says it's 1:46. I'm trying to keep this to 45 minutes or so. Folks, thanks for joining me. If you have any other questions, you can email me at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com, and I'll try to get to those emails. I am recording this, like I said earlier, so I'll put links to the recording of this or get it on YouTube so that other people can have access to the webinar. Again, if you're interested in the full course, again, I'm offering it at a big discount. It's just going to be $57 for the 5-module course, and it's going to go into detail about how to use all of these different tools in G Suite. So take care, folks. Thanks for joining me. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll be talking with you soon. Bye-bye.